So, segue into the next. Next, businesses like Walmart and Apple are promising to become more sustainable. The author of Elevated Economics is here to tell us why. Richard Steele, welcome.
Nice to be here.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Fabulous. Absolutely epic. All right, let's get right to it. Walmart has promised to be emissions-free by 2040. Tell me, what does this mean?
Well, so there was Climate Week in New York a few weeks ago, and a lot of companies made zero carbon pledges that week. Walmart took it a step further by declaring themselves a regenerative company. And what that means is they go beyond just becoming carbon neutral, but they actually pledge to restore oceans and forests as part of their pledge. So this Climate Week, there were 500 companies that had initiated carbon-free pledges. This year, that number is 1,500 companies. So it's 3 times the amount that it was in 2019. And you got to remember that CEO of Walmart is also the chairman of the board of the Business Roundtable. And the Business Roundtable is a lobbying group that includes the CEOs of some pretty huge companies. So you're talking about Mary Barra, who's the CEO of General Motors, Tim Cook of Apple, Jamie Dimon, et cetera.
So the obvious follow-up question to that is, if you're sitting on that board and Walmart is sort of leading the charge of that initiative, do you think this will trickle down to the other companies?
Absolutely, I think it will. So you've got CEO of Walmart, who's the chairman of the Business Roundtable. And the Business Roundtable includes those companies I just mentioned, plus folks like Robert Smith, who's the CEO of Vista Equity Partners. You got CEOs of Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, Marriott, Accenture, Boston Consulting Group. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Huge companies.
So what's that?
Huge companies.
Huge companies.
Yes.
Huge companies. And, you know, this organization, the Business Roundtable, just 13 months ago, they overturned a 22-year-old policy statement that defined the purpose of a corporation. So pretty big news. What they basically said is they tossed out the idea that the purpose of a corporation is only to return to shareholders, right? To return value to shareholders.
Of course, yes.
At any cost. And they basically replaced that idea with the idea that you've got to have a stakeholder mentality. You've got to provide benefit to your employees, to your vendors, to your suppliers, to the environment, right? So this
Interesting.
flies in the face of 50 years of shareholder primacy theory.
So why our business? I think this is an excellent development, and it's effectively, it mirrors what the new B Corps versus the C Corps actually do, where you have a social mission attached to the obvious initiative, which is to maximize shareholder value. Now, why are businesses more eager to go green than perhaps the government is?
Well, so it's an interesting question. It depends what government you're talking about, right? So California just announced a ban on internal combustion engine cars by 2040, I think it was. So, you know, where businesses maybe fail, I think governments are going to regulate. But if you look at ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, those practices in business, you've got the total valuation of ESG assets is around $30 trillion. So that's about 25% of the managed assets in the entire market.
Wow.
And I think the CEOs of these companies are seeing that a generational change is going to really affect them. So here's what that means. There's a thing called the Great Wealth Migration, and that's what's coming, right? $68 trillion, that's trillion with a T, of wealth is being transferred to future generations from baby boomers. And guess what? These future generations consume and invest completely differently than baby boomers.
How so?
So just in the next 2 decades alone, 40 trillion of that $68 trillion of wealth will transfer from baby boomers to specifically Gen X and millennials. And then if you look at the spending and investing habits of those groups, only about 22% of boomers express an interest in impact investing. But for Gen X, it's 31%. Now for millennials, and this is the key point here, for millennials, it's 71% that show an interest in impact-minded corporations. So when you ask why are some of these companies changing, A, of course, it's the right thing to do. You know, climate issues are in the headlines constantly, as are social justice issues. but they're also getting ahead of this great wealth migration, and that's smart on their part.
Richard, key point here. You mentioned Gen Z millennials, and that 71% you said?
71% of millennials
are interested in impact investing. Right. It's a trend that we're seeing a lot with the growth of Robinhood, people going into investing that haven't before. With social media and this generation effectively living virtually through social media, has this changed the way these companies react to the consumers and even plan for these green initiatives?
Yeah, so Philip, that's such a great question, man. You're right on it. So companies, I think in years past, can get away with foisting all these negative externalities on populations, right? On society, on the environment. They can't do that anymore, right? Ever since the advent of the iPhone, information is ubiquitous. You can't hide. Everybody knows what you're doing. And right now, if you go on any financial website, you get all the regular financial metrics, but there's also an ESG score or a sustainability score right there as well. So it's easy to research and understand what these companies are doing, how they're behaving, et cetera.
And the young generation cares about that.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, got to wrap this up.
More than previous generations.
Any final thoughts?
Well, hey, listen, I wrote a whole book about this, so I got a lot of.
Where can we find it? Where can we find your book?
Yeah, so obviously Amazon, but you can check it out, some other ideas on elevatedeconomics.org as well.
Elevatedeconomics.org. I look forward to checking that out, and I hope we can speak again in the future. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard.
Thanks so much.
By the way, it's a killer suit.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. All right.